Hey folks, if you want to stay ahead of the latest global events, make sure to follow S News to catch this story and all our future updates.
Yeah. And don't forget to support us by subscribing, liking and dropping your thoughts in the comments below. It really helps us keep bringing you these stories. At exactly 5:10 a.m. on April 22nd, 2025, 3 American missiles streaked across the early morning sky, heading straight for a forest no one was allowed to see. No planes, no warnings, no announcements, just speed, silence and steel. So what exactly were US forces targeting 80 kilometers inside Russia? Why were 15,000 North Korean soldiers stationed near Kursk, armed with long-range artillery capable of hitting NATO territory? And how could 3 HIMARS rockets, each cheaper than a missile defense radar, wipe out an entire artillery regiment in just 91 seconds? It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And every second of it was real. By mid-April 2025, US intelligence detected a worrying development on the Eastern Front. Away from global headlines, 15,000 North Korean troops had quietly arrived in Russia, but these weren't regular infantry. They were elite artillery specialists, hand-picked by Pyongyang and deployed under a new bilateral defense pact signed in late March. Their destination? The Kursk region, just 130 kilometers from NATO's borders. Among them were at least 3,000 heavy artillery personnel, bringing with them a dozen Koksan M1978 self-propelled guns, North Korea's crown jewel of long-range firepower.
Each gun can fire 100 shells, each weighing 70 kilograms over a 60-kilometer range, enough to hit US military bases in Poland and logistics hubs in eastern Romania.
But satellite recon revealed something even more concerning. Instead of reinforcing Russian lines in Ukraine, these Koksan batteries were being quietly moved into dense pine forests just outside Kursk. There, Russian engineers and North Korean crews were building semi-permanent firing positions covered with thick camouflage nets and radar-absorbing materials. It was a hidden fortress, with barrels pointed west. What shocked the Pentagon wasn't just the hardware, it was the targeting data. Intercepted communications revealed that Russian command had already drafted initial target grids, including NATO railway hubs, US ammo depots, and even Patriot missile sites. This set off immediate alarm bells in Washington and Brussels.
EUCOM, U.S. European Command, classified the Kursk artillery buildup as a Tier 1 strategic threat, both to regional stability and to American forces in Europe.
For the first time in the war, a hostile nation, not a proxy, but a rogue nuclear state, was deploying heavy weapons dangerously close to US troops on European soil.
The message from the Joint Chiefs was crystal clear. If we wait for the first shell to land, it'll be too late.
Within hours, a secret counterstrike plan was approved.
The target: 3 Koksan artillery batteries and their logistical support, hidden deep in the Kursk forest.
At exactly 5:10 a.m. on April 22, 2025, under the cover of early morning fog, 3 US M142 HIMARS units stationed near Rzeszów, Poland, received the final encrypted go-ahead. What followed wasn't a warning shot. It wasn't a show of force. It was a surgical strike, unfolding faster than the human brain can fully process. 3 M30A1 GMLRS rockets, each costing less than $150,000, were launched in rapid succession. Within just under 5 seconds, their boosters ignited, sending each missile screaming through the sky at over 10,700 kilometers per hour, flying just below radar detection. Less than a minute later, and more than 84 kilometers away, the Kursk forest was about to turn into a war zone. At 5:10 and 58 seconds, the first M30A1 exploded mid-air, just 14 meters above a North Korean ammo truck. Its warhead released 182,000 preformed tungsten fragments, blanketing a 100-meter radius in a steel storm. The truck erupted in flames, igniting fuel barrels and shredding the nearby Koksan battery. 7 crew members were killed instantly. They were later identified only by torn uniforms and twisted metal. 11 seconds later, the second rocket struck. It didn't need a direct hit. It exploded just 3 meters to the side. One fragment pierced the gun's optical sight. Another took out the fire control unit. A third ripped through the operator's leg as he reached for the trigger. The gun was silenced. disabled, disarmed, and effectively erased. At 5:11 and 28 seconds, the final rocket hit the western edge of the camp. This time it didn't detonate mid-air. It slammed directly into the third supply truck. The blast flipped the artillery piece backward, tearing the gun barrel like paper. 2 guards were vaporized on impact. One survivor tried crawling away, dragging a shattered leg before disappearing into the smoke and fire. Total destruction: 3 Koksan M1978 artillery guns obliterated, 3 trucks demolished, and over 20 enemy personnel neutralized. By the time Russian commanders on the ground even began to respond, there was nothing left to save. There had been no air raid siren, no drone buzzing, no shadows in the sky, just silence, followed by 3 bursts of invisible death that wiped out an entire regiment before it fired a single shot. For the North Koreans near Kursk, this wasn't war, it was an execution. As the smoke cleared from the HIMARS strike, US analysts started dissecting the target, what they dubbed the Phantom Fortress buried deep in the Kursk forest.
What they found was a textbook case of overconfidence, bad timing, and fatal design flaws.
The 3 Koksan batteries had been set up in a slanted triangle formation, spaced about 45 meters apart, meant to reduce the chances of being hit all at once.
Russian engineers and North Korean officers had spent nearly 72 hours preparing the site.
They used thermal camouflage nets, steel shrapnel shields, and layered visual concealment, thinking they'd built the perfect trap, one invisible to satellites and drone optics.
They were wrong. U.S. intelligence intercepted encrypted movement orders from Russia's Western Military District just 6 hours before the strike. Cross-referencing with thermal images and EM signatures confirmed this was no dummy site. It was a live, loaded, operational firebase aimed westward. But what shocked U.S. planners wasn't what was there. It was what wasn't. No short-range air defenses. Not a single Pantsir S-1, Tor M2, or even a Zu-23 in sight.
They assumed that being deep inside Russian territory was enough of a shield, that Western forces wouldn't dare strike so boldly.
Even worse, there was no active radar coverage. The nearest Podlet K1 radar station was 12 kilometers away and hadn't even synced with the fire control systems yet.
So the site wasn't just exposed, it was blind and deaf.
By the time the first HIMARS missile entered Kursk's airspace, the Koksan crews were busy running final loading drills. Overhead, a small recon drone, no bigger than a seagull, flew at just 200 feet, sending live targeting data through encrypted signals.
Its radar profile was so tiny, even if Russia's radar had been online, it would have just looked like background noise.
This wasn't a battle-ready artillery base. It was a showroom built to intimidate, not survive.
And in war, intimidation without protection is meaningless.
Kursk was about to prove that even the best camouflage bunker can't hide from a combination of US satellites, AI-powered targeting, and warheads designed not to breach, but to erase. The fortress never fired a single shot, and it never will. The Russian-North Korean alliance never saw it coming, not because it moved too fast, but because there was never anything to see.
HIMARS missiles aren't feared because of their noise. They're feared because of the silence that follows.
By the time a target realizes it's being hunted, the launchers are already gone. The sky is empty.
What remains is scorched steel and silence. At 5:13 a.m., just 2 minutes after the last missile hit, Russia's forward command post west of Kursk tried to raise the battery on encrypted radio. Nothing, no telemetry, no heat signatures, no GPS signals from crew devices. It wasn't jamming, it wasn't signal loss, it was absence. The kind of silence that only follows complete annihilation.
3 minutes later, a Russian Orlan-10 recon drone launched from Belgorod finally reached the strike zone. Its camera feed confirmed the unthinkable. The 3 Koksan guns had been reduced to scrap. The ammo trucks were scorched and torn apart. No signs of survivors, no movement, nothing. This wasn't a battlefield loss, it was an extinction event.
The consequences were immediate. All deployments of Koksan units on the Western Front were halted indefinitely. What Moscow had once hailed as a decisive reinforcement from North Korea was now seen as a disposable liability.
For Pyongyang, it was far worse. The Kim regime had proudly announced its alliance with Moscow, showcasing its exported artillery as a symbol of strength and solidarity. Now, its best gunners had been wiped out without firing a shot.
The message from Washington couldn't have been clearer. Weapons delivered to Russia are fair game for American retaliation. The ripple effects went far beyond Ukraine. NATO commanders across Eastern Europe reported a steep drop in enemy long-range artillery activity over the next 72 hours.
Even with censorship in place, Russian social media lit up with leaked images of the strike's aftermath, twisted barrels, flaming camouflage, torn-up forest. Global analysts started asking the one question Moscow fears most. If HIMARS can strike this deep, this quietly and this fast, where will it strike next? Kursk wasn't a large-scale assault. It was a precise intervention, meant not to escalate, but to redefine the rules of engagement. And for the 15,000 North Korean troops still stationed across Russian territory, one fact is now impossible to ignore. They're not reinforcements. They're targets. In the stillness of the Kursk forest, where twisted wreckage now rusts beneath scorched pine trees, a new chapter in modern warfare was quietly written. Not with declarations, but with speed, coordination, and silence. The United States didn't invade, it didn't send fleets or squadrons, it sent 3 missiles, launched from a platform the size of a fire truck, guided by a drone smaller than a backpack, executed in 91 seconds. In that time, an entire North Korean artillery regiment simply ceased to exist.
This wasn't just a strike. It was a statement that American restraint has limits, that being close to NATO's borders is not protection, and that when threats emerge from the shadowy corners of sovereign forests, precision will find them. For the Kremlin, the humiliation was severe. For Pyongyang, the warning was historic. For the world, the message couldn't be louder. In an age where desperate alliances outsource firepower across continents, the U.S.
doesn't wait for escalation.